Hey there everybody, Travis Bowman here. We've got two Sega Dreamcasts on the table today, and we're going to have a discussion about what's inside of each of these. We've replaced the disk drive with what's called an ODE, and that stands for Optical Drive Emulator. Odds are if you're watching this video, you probably know exactly what these things are, but just in case you don't, an Optical Drive Emulator is a device that's meant to replace the old disk drive on a console, a disk-based console. So here's the old GD-ROM drive. This is the thing that you put the disk in, and there's the laser right there, and it reads the disk and allows you to play that disk. The problem with these old disk drives is that they're getting old. They're 20 or 30 years old at this point, and a lot of times this laser will start to crap out on you, and maybe even the capacitors inside of this thing are starting to go bad as well. You know, it's just really old technology at this point, and it's not that easy to replace this laser. It's not like they're making any more of these things anymore. The Dreamcast has been discontinued since the early 2000s, so that's where the ODE comes in. It's a device that's meant to emulate just the disk drive. There's a lot of confusion about that, where people are thinking that, oh, you're just turning this console into some sort of emulation box or something like that. That's not true. See, all the guts and stuff are still inside of this console. All the power supply, the motherboard, the controller board, everything has been left alone. The only thing that we're removing is the device that reads the media, right? So optical drive emulators are actually becoming a really popular thing. I'm sure you're familiar with the EverDrive, which is basically the same sort of situation, only we're going back a couple generations to the cartridge-based systems. That's a really popular thing, and I've got a couple of different videos on various EverDrive cartridges. So it's kind of in the same area, the same sort of thing. Now, for the Sega Dreamcast, there seems to be currently two options. So to my left here, we've got what's called the GDEMU, and it's exactly the way it's spelled, GDEMU. Now, this is the first device that came out for your Sega Dreamcast that's going to allow you to read your games, not off of a disc, but an SD card. And that's exactly what I've got here. It's a 256 gigabyte, just regular old SanDisk, and it pops right in there, and that's my entire game library on one device. You don't have to change discs anymore, and that's really cool. It's a really cool device. And to take it even one step further, over here on the right we have a device from Terra Onion, and it's called the Mode. And there's no SD card here. We've got a solid state drive, specifically a 1 terabyte solid state drive plugged into our Sega Dreamcast. In my opinion, this is probably a bit overkill. So I've got two examples right here, two choices if you're looking to upgrade your Sega Dreamcast in order to prolong the life of the system. And that's kind of what we're doing here when we're adding these ODEs in here. You know, the future is here, I guess, and unfortunately those disk drives are not staying with us as long as we would have hoped they would have. So it's just really nice to have these options here if you're a big fan of playing on original hardware. So why do I have both of these in two different Dreamcasts? Well, I'm a guitar teacher, that's my day job, but I do YouTube on the side, and I also like to try to fix up old video game consoles just like the ones you're seeing here. I'm not the best at it by any means, I'm not a professional, but I do like to try to do it on my own, and it's a really good learning experience, and I've learned a lot. I've screwed up a lot of consoles, but I've also fixed a lot of them too. So it's just a fun little hobby. But the reason that I have these two here, this Dreamcast over here is my personal Dreamcast with the GDEMU installed, and a gentleman reached out to me and asked me if I would be interested in installing this Mode for him, for his Dreamcast, and that's exactly what I've done here. Both of these options in front of me in my house, I might as well do a video and do a comparison and at least talk about the differences that I've noticed between the two. So if you're looking to get one of these for your Dreamcast, I thought I'd just share a little bit of my experiences with both devices. So let's start with the GDEMU, because I have the most history with that. I actually got this device for the first time a few years ago, 3-4 years ago now maybe. It's worked great for me, to be honest. It's extremely easy to install. So I'll show you the original disk drive once again. And you know, it looks like this, but this is all we're working with down here. You can kind of see it right there. It's a Lego style port, you know, it's just a plug and play sort of thing. Yeah, this thing is attached by some screws on the actual motherboard there, but that's really the only thing that's connected to the motherboard is that little piece. So once you get those screws out, you can just lift that guy up out of there, and it's actually extremely easy to do. The main difference between the GDEMU and your mode is the fact that you're working with this SD card storage here. That's really your only option for storing your games on the GDEMU is this SD card. You can use one of those adapters. It's like this is the full-size SD card. If you've got a micro SD card, you can use an adapter to convert it to this full size there. In my experience, it's worked just fine. The GDEMU first came about from a gentleman, and I don't recall his name, and I'm so sorry about that, but I'll put that information in the description below. But a dude just kind of put this together, and he made it open source for anybody to create their own. So the original GDEMU that came from this gentleman is extremely rare and hard to find, and he just kind of quit making them. What you see before you is a knockoff. This didn't come from this guy. This is a device that was probably manufactured, made, and shipped from China. So it's important to understand where you're getting this and where it's coming from. But that being said, I recently bought a lot of not working Dreamcasts on eBay, about 4 or 5 of them, and on every single one of those I put in a GDEMU with the intention to sell them locally, and I sure did, man. I sold every single one of them and made a little bit of a profit, not too much, but it was a really fun project. It took me a few weeks to do. It was really fun, and everybody that has received their GDEMU has been really happy with it so far, which is a really cool thing, and I'm a big fan of the Dreamcast, so it's really cool to be kind of spreading that love here local. Okay, so on the right, let's talk about the mode and the big differences between the two. So on your mode, we should probably mention the fact that mode, M-O-D-E, actually stands for something. It's the multi-optical disc emulator. This device right here is not just for the Sega Dreamcast. This can be used in a multitude of different consoles. So the mode currently works for the Sega Dreamcast. You can also install it in a Sega Saturn, and you can also, most recently, install it into a Sony PlayStation 1, which is really cool. Now there's a few different storage devices that you can use for that mode. The most obvious one is going to be your solid state drive, but you can also use a USB device if you so desire. I don't know why you do that when you have the option of using an SSD, but that option is there. The big selling point with the mode is that it's one device that can do a bunch of different things. The problem is, do you really want to unplug this thing and put it in your Saturn when you're done playing your Dreamcast, or put it in your PlayStation when you're done playing your Saturn, etc.? So a lot of people with a lot of money tend to want to purchase multiple different modes for their different consoles, and that's a really cool thing. It's a cool option if you've got the cash to spend on it, but most people will probably just buy this for one console and be happy with that. Okay, so let's talk about functionality between the two devices. Do they perform differently? Is there anything too crazy? To be honest with you, I'll lay it out as plain as I can. The mode has a little bit of a better user interface in my opinion. They got a few different options there that the GDEMU does not, but at the end of the day, those interfaces are pretty vanilla. You know, they're pretty plain. They're there just to help you pick a game. Just pick the game and it's back to being a normal Dreamcast at that point. So there's not too much of a difference between those interfaces. So let's talk setup. Now, I just mentioned previously that both of these devices are pretty plug and play. There's a screw over here on the GDEMU, and that's how you install it. You insert it right there, and then you use a screw to kind of screw it in place. And most of these GDEMU clones will come with these little black legs that you can use to help kind of mount that GDEMU. Now the Terra Onion mode is pretty much the same thing. The only difference is that they send you these little plastic feet with some adhesive on the bottom of it, so you can kind of mount it in your Dreamcast forever, or you can just kind of temporarily sit it in there if you want. For this gentleman, I went ahead and removed that adhesive, so it's kind of mounted in there very securely for him. But if you were one of those people that wanted to change out this mode for your different consoles, I suppose what you could do is just put your lid back on but not screw it in, and then when you're ready to pull this out, you could pull it out and change it between your consoles, but you just have to use these feet without taking that tape off. But to each their own. I don't know who would want to do that, but more power to you if you do. So on both of these devices, you have the ability to go back to the main menu with a simple button combination. So you can press all of the face buttons, A, B, X, and Y, and then press start. Now, normally on a Dreamcast that has the disk drive, that'll just take you back to the title screen of whatever game that you're playing. However, with these ODEs, that button combination will do what I just said. It'll take you back to the title screen, but if you do it again, it will bring you back to the menu of whatever optical drive emulator that you're using. So no more having to get up out of your chair to go turn the console off and then back on if you want to select another game. So that's a really nice feature that both of these devices have. So installing both of these physically into your Dreamcast is actually a really easy thing to do. It's like putting Legos together, man, and if you're unsure, follow a video tutorial and just take it slow, do it step by step. I promise you, a 10-year-old could do this successfully. Now let's talk about the software side of setting up both of these devices here. So the GDEMU is kind of a pain in the butt to set up. It used to be that you would have to take your game and put it into a folder, and you'd have to number that folder 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it would go on depending on how many games you wanted installed on your SD card. Now there's a program for PCs, and I'm pretty sure it's for Mac, that allows you to have a little bit more control over that. You don't have to go through that process of numbering each folder. The program does that for you. So you'll open this program and you'll pick which games you want and add them into the program, and then it does all that hard work for you. But that being said, you still have to pick each game one by one by one. And if you have over 200 games, which if you have a 256 gig SD card, then you'll be able to fit that many on that SD card. If you have over 200 games though, that's going to take you a long time. It's going to take you a really long time to do them individually. I tried to do the drag and drop method because, like I said, I had my own GDEMU, and I was thinking it would be really cool to just, I'll just save a bunch of time and just drag and drop everything that was on this SD card on my console into somebody else's console. But it didn't turn out the way I planned. And unfortunately, some of those games just weren't reading properly, which was a real pain in the butt. And so I had to manually add each one of these games onto this program to put on that SD card. So it was a little time consuming, but I just wanted to let you know what that's going to be like if you're looking into the GDEMU. Now the Terra Onion mode, on the other hand, is an extremely easy process to put games onto that SSD. It's literally drag and drop. So every folder needs to have its own name, so let's say, for example, Power Stone and Power Stone 2. You'll need to name each folder Power Stone and then Power Stone 2 and have the appropriate game files inside of each of those respected folders. And if you've got multiple consoles, then you can have multiple folders for those consoles. So for example, on the root of this SSD, you could have your PlayStation folder, your Sega Saturn folder, and your Dreamcast folder. And that's all you really need. It's extremely easy to use, a lot better to set up, a lot easier to set up than the GDEMU was. So that's a plus for the Terra Onion mode for sure. Let's talk real quick about Terra Onion. This does not belong to me. A gentleman that hired me to mess with his Dreamcast purchased this, and he gave it to me to use and install and get working for him, and it worked just fine. It's working just fine and all that good stuff. I don't have anything bad to say about Terra Onion as far as getting this installed and everything. It's not that. It's the weird thing that they make you do when you buy one of their products. So I wanted to update the firmware on this for this guy. I get onto the website. They make you sign up and make an account to use the manual as well as download firmware updates. And there's a reason for that. And I believe the main reason is because they do not want you to sell this secondhand. If you purchase this, you have to make an account that's locked to your email address and to your information. So if you sold this, this device is locked to you pretty much. So that's a real pain in the ass if you're trying to sell something from Terra Onion. Now I've got another device from them. It's the Super HD System 3 that you can use on your TurboGrafx/PC Engine consoles, and I had to do the same thing. I had to register and make an account. So that's kind of screwy. I'm not a big fan of that because there's no telling that you're going to want to keep this for the rest of your life, and it's still valuable. These things are not cheap. You know, they're kind of expensive, so I'm not a big fan of that. This isn't mine, but I still had to configure it for somebody that did not want to do it themselves. So that was kind of awkward, me reaching out to him and saying, hey, so here's a thing. Terra Onion makes you sign up for this stuff. So what do you want to do? Do you want to make the account yourself and then send me the stuff that I need to make this work? Or do you want me to add it to my account? And, you know, this is easy to do. All of this stuff, it's not too crazy. It's pretty easy to do. But he just didn't want to mess with it. He was totally fine with paying me to do it for him. And the same thing applied when I reached out to him about this Terra Onion website stuff. He said, yeah, just go ahead and do it. But, you know, the mode has been around for long enough that even if there was a firmware update in the next month or so, it would probably not be super significant for this guy who just wants to play Sega Dreamcast games using an optical drive emulator. Now, the GDEMU, as far as firmware updates, you're kind of screwed on that. So this version right here, I'll get up close and personal so you can see. This is the GDEMU version 5.20.5, and you can see the September 2023 date on there. As far as I know, as of the making of this video, that is the current GDEMU. I actually have an older version. I have the 5.15 point whatever version. Now there's a few differences between the two. It's really nothing major. It's my understanding that if you tried to do a firmware update on this device, because it's not legitimate, it's a knockoff from China, you could potentially brick the device. So firmware updates are a no-go on the GDEMU unless you have the real deal, which most people at this point do not because it's extremely rare and ungodly expensive. Now, speaking of ungodly expensive, that brings me to my next point. Now that we've learned more about these two devices here, how much are they? Well, the GDEMU, depending on where you get it from, you can get this on Amazon, believe it or not. Or you can go the AliExpress route. I've seen them sell recently, and you'll have to check the date of this video because it might have changed quite a bit since then, but they're about $80 to $90. And if you want like a plastic enclosure that will cover this up, when you pop the lid to your Dreamcast, it'll look more complete, I guess, and it's easier to access the SD card. That'll be a little more. I don't think you would ever pay over $200 for a GDEMU setup like this, Back when I got my first one, I think I paid like $120 for everything, and it did have the plastic enclosure, so there's that. Do you need that stuff? Absolutely not. The GDEMU is actually pretty affordable. I think you can probably get a decent setup with the SD card and all that stuff for less than $150, which is actually really nice. These clones used to be super cheap a few years ago. They were like $40, but now, unfortunately, you won't be able to get them for that cheap after what happened in 2020 and the chip shortage and all that good stuff. So now let's talk about our best buddy, the Terra Onion mode over here. This device will run you just over $200 for the device itself, and that is not counting however much this gentleman spent on this Samsung 1TB SSD. And I have to look it up, to be honest with you, because I have no idea. That's a lot of money, and I understand that their selling point is that we've put a lot of time and effort and work into this device to make it highly configurable for 3 completely different consoles. That's really cool, and it's nice that you can go to one place to get an ODE for your 3 different consoles: PlayStation, Sega Saturn, and Sega Dreamcast. That's really cool if you're just wanting something for your Sega Dreamcast. What if you don't have any of those other consoles? If I got this for myself, I probably would just use it in one console because I would never want to open this thing up. Like I said, I've just sold a bunch of Sega Dreamcasts and I worked on a bunch of them. I am so tired of having to unscrew the lid and take it off. That seems like a nightmare. And you don't want to leave your lid just on because what if it falls to the ground or something? Anything could happen. And then your console will be bare open and its guts exposed, and that's just an accident waiting to happen. You want those screws in there for a reason. I don't know, man. I guess we should come to the end of this video at this point. I think I definitely would go GDEMU over the mode. Like I said, the interfaces, although this one's a little bit nicer, and you could tell it's got more going on for it over there. The GDEMU is a better bang for your buck, in my opinion. Now you're probably asking yourself, there's an SSD in here, solid state drive, and that should automatically equate to speed. Do the games load any faster because you've got an SSD versus reading off of an SD card? From what I've seen, not really. If there is a difference, we're talking a few seconds. It's nothing like there's not a lot of crazy loading on the Dreamcast like there was on the Saturn and on the original PlayStation. And I can't speak for the PlayStation or the Saturn regarding the mode because I've never used it in those consoles before. It's up to you, man. I would really encourage you, if you have any experience with any of these devices, to start a discussion in the comment section below. And I'm sure I missed a little bit of information, and if I did, please feel free to correct me in the comment section below, and let's start a discussion about this. And I would like to see who prefers the mode and who prefers the GDEMU, and most importantly, why. If you have any advice for anyone that's looking to get into this kind of thing themselves, feel free to share that as well. I just wanted to make this video because as of right now, I've got both of these devices right in front of me. I'm taking this to this gentleman tomorrow.